He smelled it before he saw it. Pine. Sharp. Cutting through his mansion like a knife. Nicholas Vieri froze in the doorway, his jaw clenching so hard it hurt. No. Not in his house. Never in his house. 30 years. 30 years he'd banned Christmas trees from every property he owned. And now one stood glowing in his parlor, fully decorated, mocking him with memories he'd buried alive. His housekeeper appeared in the doorway. Margaret Bennett. 3 weeks on the job. Eyes steady. Unafraid. "I did it," she said quietly. His rage exploded. "Do you have any idea what I could do to you?" "I know exactly who you are." She didn't flinch. "I did it anyway." Then she asked the question that would change everything. "What did a Christmas tree ever do to you?" And 30 years of buried hell came rushing back. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you are hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comment section where you are watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you an interesting story such as this one and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. He'd spent 30 years ensuring no Christmas tree would ever enter his home, until she walked in and dared to resurrect the boy he'd buried. Nicholas Vieri smelled it before he saw it. Pine. Fresh and sharp, cutting through the usual scent of leather and expensive cologne that filled his estate. He froze in the marble entryway, his hands still on the door, snow melting off his coat onto the floor. No. Not in his house. Not ever in his house. His jaw clenched as he moved through the foyer, past the sweeping staircase, toward the main parlor, the room he'd specifically told his staff was forbidden territory. His footsteps echoed like gunshots in the silence. And then he saw it. A 6-foot Christmas tree stood in the corner by the window, fully decorated. White lights wound through its branches, glowing soft and warm. Red and gold ornaments caught the light. A star perched on top, slightly crooked. Beneath it, wrapped boxes that he knew damn well were empty. Just props, just decorations, just reminders of a life he'd never been allowed to have. His hands curled into fists. 30 years. 30 years he'd maintained this rule. Every housekeeper, every assistant, every person who'd ever worked for him knew. No Christmas decorations. No trees. No lights. No carols. Nothing that pretended the world was kind or that joy belonged to men like him. Who did this? His voice cut through the house like a blade. Silence answered him. Then, soft footsteps on the hardwood floor. She appeared in the doorway. Margaret Bennett, the housekeeper his security team had vetted 3 weeks ago. Mid-30s, he'd guess. Brown skin, natural hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing the simple black uniform all his staff wore. But her eyes weren't lowered in deference like the others. They met his directly, steady and unafraid. That alone should have warned him. "I did," she said quietly. Nicholas stared at her, his rage building like a wave. "You did?" "Yes, sir." After being explicitly told, his voice rose. "That I don't allow Christmas decorations in this house. I know what the rules are." Her voice remained calm, maddeningly calm. "I broke them." He took a step toward her, and he saw it, the slight tensing of her shoulders, the way her breath caught. She was afraid. Good. She should be afraid. Men twice her size had cowered when Nicholas Vieri got angry. But she didn't move. Didn't drop her gaze. "Do you have any idea who I am?" His voice dropped to something deadly soft. "What I could do to you for this kind of disrespect? I know exactly who you are." She paused. "And I know what you could do. I did it anyway." The audacity of it stunned him into silence for 3 full seconds. "Why?" The word came out like gravel. She looked at the tree, and something shifted in her expression. Something raw and aching that he recognized because he'd spent 3 decades trying to bury the same thing in himself. Because Christmas trees don't belong to happy people, Mr. Vieri. She turned back to him. They belong to people who need to remember that light still exists, even in the dark. I didn't ask for a philosophy lesson. I asked why you violated a direct order. Because I've been cleaning this house for 3 weeks, she said, her voice steady but carrying an edge now. And in 3 weeks, I haven't seen you smile once. I haven't heard music. I haven't seen a single photograph on these walls or a single personal item that suggests anyone actually lives here. This place is a tomb, Mr. Vieri. Beautiful and expensive and completely dead. That's not your concern. You're right. It's not. She folded her hands in front of her, and he saw they were trembling slightly, the only sign she wasn't as composed as she appeared. But I lost someone I love. And I made her a promise that I'd keep Christmas alive, no matter where I was or who told me not to. So I decorated that tree. For her. Not for you. The words hit him like a punch to the chest, but he masked it with ice. Then you can take it down. Tonight. And tomorrow morning, you can collect your final paycheck and never come back. He expected tears. Expected pleading. Expected her to crumble the way people always did when he wielded his power like a weapon. Instead, she nodded once. All right, she said softly. I'll take it down. But can I ask you something first? No. She asked anyway. What did a Christmas tree ever do to you? The question landed like a grenade in the space between them. For a moment, just a flicker, he was 7 years old again, watching his father tear paper stars off branches and throw them into the fire. Feeling his mother's hand on his shoulder, too gentle to protect him, too frightened to try. Learning that wanting beautiful things only gave the world more ways to hurt you. He shoved the memory down where it belonged. Deep. Buried. Dead. Get it out of my sight, he said, his voice like winter. You have until morning. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing through his empty, perfect house. Behind him, Margaret Bennett stood alone in the soft glow of the tree lights, her hands still trembling, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd just gambled her only source of income on a Christmas tree. And she had no idea if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life, or the best decision she'd ever make. But here's what she did know. Some things are worth the risk. Some promises are worth keeping. Even when it costs you everything. Have you ever stood up for something you believed in, even when it put everything at risk? Tell us in the comments. Nicholas didn't sleep. He sat in his office until 3 a.m., a glass of whiskey in his hand that he never drank, staring at the wall where shadows danced from the streetlights outside. He could still smell the pine. It shouldn't have bothered him this much. It was just a tree. Just decorations. Just some woman who didn't know her place thinking she could bring warmth into a house that was never meant to hold it. But it wasn't the tree that kept him awake. It was the question. What did a Christmas tree ever do to you? Nobody had ever asked him that. Nobody had ever dared to look past his power and his money and his carefully constructed walls to see the wound beneath. They were too afraid. Too smart. Too aware that men like Nicholas Vieri didn't have wounds, they inflicted them. Except she'd seen it anyway. He closed his eyes, and the memory came flooding back, the one he'd spent 3 decades trying to drown. 30 years ago. He was 7 years old, and it was 3 days before Christmas. His father, Vittorio Vieri, was in his study conducting business. That's what his mother called it, her voice tight with fear. Nicholas knew what business meant. It meant shouting. Sometimes gunshots. Always fear that soaked into the walls like smoke. But that day, his father was gone to the city. And his mother, soft-spoken gentle Anna, had smiled at him over breakfast. What do you want for Christmas, Tesoro? Nicholas had learned early not to want things. Wanting meant disappointment. But that morning, with his mother's smile warming the kitchen, he'd whispered it. A Christmas tree. Like the ones in town. With lights. His mother's smile had faltered. Your father doesn't like. I know. But maybe if we got a small one? Just for my room. She touched his face, her hand gentle. Let me think about it. He should have known better. 2 days later, he'd found a small pine sapling near the edge of their property. It was barely 4 feet tall, scraggly and imperfect. But to 7-year-old Nicholas, it was magic. He'd dragged it inside. Used string to tie paper stars he'd cut from his school notebooks. Wrapped it in a bedsheet like snow. Set it up in the corner of the parlor where afternoon light came through the windows. His mother had found him sitting in front of it, his small face glowing with something he'd never felt before, hope. Oh, Nicholas! Her voice had been thick with something between love and terror. Do you like it, Mama? Before she could answer, the front door had slammed open. His father had come home early. Vittorio Vieri was a mountain of a man, 6'4" barrel-chested, with hands that could break bones and eyes that could strip the courage from grown men. He'd built his empire on fear, and he ruled his home the same way. He'd stood in the parlor doorway, staring at the tree. The silence had been worse than shouting. What, his father had said slowly, is that? Nicholas had stood, his small body trembling. I made it. For Christmas. I thought. You thought. His father's voice was soft. Deadly. You thought you could bring this weakness into my house? Vittorio, please. His mother had stepped forward. Be quiet, Anna. His father's eyes never left Nicholas. You want to be like them? Like the soft, pathetic families in town who teach their sons that the world is kind? That life is fair. I just wanted. Want. His father spat the word. That's your problem. You want. You feel. You hope. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed the tree, ripped it from its makeshift stand. Paper stars scattered like broken wings. No, please, Nicholas had begged, tears streaming down his face. His father had thrown the tree into the fireplace. Watched it burn. Then he turned to Nicholas, crouched down, gripped his small shoulders hard enough to bruise. Listen to me, boy. Christmas trees are for people who believe in fairy tales. We are not those people. We are wolves. And wolves don't decorate. He'd straightened, looked at Anna. If I ever see another Christmas decoration in this house, you'll both regret it. His mother had pulled Nicholas close that night, held him while he cried, whispered apologies into his hair. 3 months later, she was dead. Car accident, they'd said. But Nicholas had seen the bruises on her arms at the funeral. Had seen the way his father didn't cry. And he'd learned the final lesson. Love makes you vulnerable. Joy makes you weak. Hope makes you a target. So he'd stopped hoping. Nicholas opened his eyes, his throat tight. The tree in his parlor wasn't just a tree. It was every Christmas he'd been denied. Every moment of softness his father had beaten out of him. Every part of himself he'd had to kill to survive. And that woman, Margaret, had walked into his fortress and resurrected it. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. He should fire her. Should have the tree removed and forget this ever happened. But when he walked to the parlor, drawn by something he couldn't name, he found her there. She was on her knees beside the tree, not removing it, praying. Her voice was barely a whisper, but in the silent house, he heard every word. I know you can see this tree, baby girl. I know you're watching. Mama kept her promise. She always will. Her shoulders shook. Nicholas stood frozen in the doorway, watching this woman grieve for a daughter she'd lost, and something in his chest, something he'd thought was dead, cracked. She turned suddenly, sensing him. Her eyes were wet, but her gaze was fierce. "I'll take it down," she said, her voice hoarse. "But not tonight. Tonight it stays. For her." He should have said no. Should have asserted control, reminded her who held the power here. Instead, he heard himself ask, "What was her name?" Margaret blinked, surprise flickering across her face. "Lily. Her name was Lily." "How old?" "8. She'd be 10 now. The same age he'd been when his mother died." "Keep the tree," he said abruptly. "Until Christmas. Then it goes." He turned and walked away before she could respond, before she could see that his hands were shaking, before she could ask the question he was too terrified to answer. What if she's right? What if joy doesn't belong only to people who've earned it? What if it belongs to everyone? Even men like me. Could one act of defiance really change everything? Or are some wounds too deep to heal? The next morning, Nicholas woke to the sound of humming. He lay in bed for a moment, disoriented. In 15 years of living in this estate, he'd never woken to sound that wasn't his own. The house was designed for silence. Thick walls, soundproofed rooms, staff who moved like ghosts. But someone was humming. A Christmas carol, soft and lilting, drifting up from somewhere below. He threw on clothes and descended the stairs, following the sound to the kitchen. Margaret stood at the counter, kneading dough, flour dusting her dark hands. She wore the same black uniform, but she'd traded the severe bun for a loose braid over her shoulder. The winter sunlight streaming through the window caught the silver threading through her hair at the temples. She looked up when he entered, and the humming stopped. "Mr. Vieri." She wiped her hands on a towel. "I'm making breakfast. It'll be ready in 20 minutes. I don't eat breakfast." "You should. You're too thin." The audacity of it, of her, made his jaw clench. "Excuse me. I've been here 3 weeks. I've seen what you eat. Or rather, what you don't eat. Coffee, whiskey, and whatever your chef leaves in the fridge that you ignore. That's not sustainable. What I eat is none of your concern." "You're right." She turned back to her dough, rolling it with practiced efficiency. "But I'm here and I'm cooking, so you might as well eat." He should have fired her on the spot. Should have called security and had her escorted off the property. Instead, he found himself standing there, watching her work, caught off guard by the normalcy of it. "You kept the tree," she said without looking at him. "I told you that you could keep it until Christmas." "You also told me I was fired." "I changed my mind." She paused, glanced at him over her shoulder. "Why?" "Because I heard you praying to your dead daughter and it broke something in me I didn't know was still capable of breaking," he thought. "Because good help is hard to find," he said instead. She studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face for something. Then she nodded and returned to her work. "The tree stays in the parlor," he said abruptly. "Nowhere else. No other decorations. No music. No joy," she finished softly. "Got it." The word hung between them like an accusation. "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant." She shaped the dough into rolls with gentle, efficient movements. "You've turned this entire house into a monument to misery, Mr. Vieri. But that's your choice. I'll respect it. The tree stays in the parlor. Nothing else." He should have felt victorious. He'd set the boundaries, maintained control, kept her in her place. So why did it feel like he'd lost something? The day passed in tense silence. Nicholas worked in his office, handling the legitimate businesses that fronted his less legitimate ones. Import-export, real estate, investments. All clean on paper. All carefully constructed to hide the empire of fear his father had built and he'd inherited. But he couldn't concentrate. Every time he tried to focus on spreadsheets or contracts, his mind drifted to the parlor, to the tree, to the woman who dared to plant hope in his house like a bomb. At noon, she brought him lunch on a tray. Homemade soup, fresh bread, sliced fruit arranged with care. "I don't remember asking for this." "You didn't. I made extra." She set it on his desk. "Eat it or don't." "But it's there." She turned to leave. "Margaret." She stopped, her hand on the doorframe. It was the first time he'd used her name. "Why are you really here?" he asked. "The agency said you worked at a hotel before this. Higher profile, better hours, probably better pay. Why take a job as a housekeeper in a private home?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. "Because hotels are full of people," she finally said, her back still to him. "And people ask questions. They see you're sad, and they try to fix it. They mean well, but sometimes you need to grieve without an audience. So you came here to hide. I came here to survive." She looked back at him, and her eyes were older than her years. "There's a difference." She left before he could respond. Nicholas stared at the soup until it went cold. That evening, he found himself drawn to the parlor again. The tree glowed in the darkness, its lights reflecting off the polished floor. It looked absurdly out of place in his austere home. Too bright, too alive, too hopeful. He approached it slowly, as if it might attack him. Up close, he could see the ornaments more clearly. Most were generic, red glass balls, gold stars. But near the bottom, almost hidden, hung a small construction paper angel. Glitter wings. A crooked halo. A child's careful coloring. He reached for it without thinking, his fingers hovering over the delicate paper. That was Lily's. He spun around. Margaret stood in the doorway, a laundry basket balanced on her hip. "I didn't hear you come in." "I know. You were too focused." She set the basket down, walked over to stand beside him. She made it in second grade. Her teacher said it was the most creative angel in the class. Lily was so proud. Nicholas's hand dropped to his side. "You brought it here. To my house. I bring it everywhere." She touched the angel gently, her fingers reverent. "It's all I have left of her Christmases. Her joy. Her belief that the world was magic." "The world isn't magic." "No," Margaret agreed softly. "It's cruel and unfair, and it takes away the people we love without asking permission. But that doesn't mean we stop looking for the light, Mr. Vieri. It just means we have to fight harder to find it." He turned to face her fully. "You think a tree and some ornaments are going to fix something broken?" "No." She met his gaze steadily. "But I think they remind us that broken things can still be beautiful. That grief and joy can exist in the same space. That we're allowed to keep living even after we lose everything." "You don't know anything about what I've lost." "You're right. I don't." She tilted her head slightly. "But I know what I see. A man who lives in a palace and has nothing. Who's surrounded by luxury but starves himself. Who's so terrified of feeling anything that he's built a fortress around his own heart." "You're overstepping." "I know." She didn't back down. "But someone needs to tell you the truth. You're not living, Mr. Vieri. You're just existing. And that's not the same thing." The words hit like bullets. He wanted to rage at her, to put her in her place, to remind her that she was nothing, a housekeeper, a nobody, Someone who cleaned his floors and had no right to see him this clearly. Instead, he did something he hadn't done in 30 years. He told the truth. "My father burned my Christmas tree," he said, his voice raw. "I was 7. I brought it home because I wanted to feel normal. Just once. And he threw it in the fire and told me that hope was for weak people. That joy would get me killed." Margaret's expression softened, but she didn't look away. "And then he proved it," Nicholas continued. "My mother, the only person who ever showed me gentleness, died 3 months later. And I learned that he was right. Caring about things, wanting things, hoping for things. It only gives the world more ways to hurt you." "So you stopped hoping," Margaret said quietly. "I stopped everything." He gestured to the house around them. "This is what's left. Money. Power. Control. Things that can't be taken away. Things that can't die. Things that can't love you back," she added softly. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 30 years of grief he'd never allowed himself to feel. "I'm sorry," Margaret finally said. "About your mother. About your father. About all of it. I don't need your pity." "Good. Because I'm not offering pity." She turned to face the tree again. "I'm offering understanding. We're both here, Mr. Vieri. Both of U.S. survivors of losses that should have destroyed us. Both of us trying to figure out how to keep breathing when the people we loved can't anymore." She picked up her laundry basket, started to leave, then paused. "The tree stays," she said firmly. "Not because you're allowing it, but because some things are too important to negotiate. Grief doesn't give us permission to stop honoring the people we've lost. Not yours. Not mine." She left him standing there, alone with the glowing tree and the ghost of a 7-year-old boy who'd believed, just once, that Christmas could be magic. Sometimes the hardest person to fight is yourself. Have you ever resisted something you needed because accepting it felt too dangerous? The storm hit that night like an act of God. Nicholas was in his study reviewing contracts when the lights flickered once, twice, then died. Emergency generators kicked in immediately, bathing the estate in dim auxiliary lighting that turned every shadow into something ominous. His phone buzzed. His head of security. "Roads are closed. Black ice. Multiple accidents on the highway. Nobody's getting in or out until morning." Nicholas stared at the message, then at the window where snow swirled in violent gusts, erasing the world beyond the glass. He was trapped in his own house. With her. He found Margaret in the kitchen, lighting candles with practiced efficiency. She'd changed out of her uniform into jeans and a dark green sweater that made her skin glow warm in the candlelight. Her hair was down now, natural curls framing her face. She looked up when he entered. "Power's out. I noticed. Generators will keep the heat on, but the stove is gas, so I can still cook. I was going to make dinner. Are you hungry?" The question was so domestic, so normal, that it disarmed him completely. "I can feed myself." "I know you can. I'm asking if you want to eat together." She paused. "Or you can take your plate to your study like always and we can both pretend we're not trapped in this house alone, riding out a blizzard." The way she said it, without judgment, just honesty, made something in his chest tighten. "What are you making?" A small smile touched her lips. "Pasta. Nothing fancy. Comfort food." Comfort. Such a foreign concept in this house. "Fine," he heard himself say. "I'll eat in the dining room." "We're eating in the kitchen," she corrected gently. "The dining room is too formal. And too cold." She was right. The kitchen, with its gas stove and candles, was the warmest room in the house. He watched her work. Chopping garlic, boiling water, moving with the confidence of someone who'd cooked 1,000 meals and knew exactly what she was doing. There was something hypnotic about it. Something soothing. "You can sit," she said without looking at him. "You don't have to stand there like a bodyguard." He sat at the small kitchen table, feeling strangely out of place in his own home. "Can I ask you something?" she said, stirring the pasta. "You're going to anyway." That earned him another small smile. "Why did you really let me keep the tree?" He should have deflected. Should have lied. But the candlelight and the storm and the strange intimacy of being trapped together loosened something in him. "Because you weren't afraid of me," he said quietly. "Everyone else who works here, they're terrified. They do exactly what I say, never question, never push back. They see the power and the money and they forget there's a person underneath." "And I didn't?" "You saw the person. And you challenged him anyway." She was quiet for a moment, draining the pasta, tossing it with olive oil and garlic. "I lost everything when Lily died, Mr. Vieri. My daughter. My marriage. My husband couldn't handle the grief, so he left. My savings went to medical bills. I lost my home. My friends stopped calling because I was too sad to be around." She plated the food, brought it to the table, sat across from him. "When you've lost that much," she continued, "you stop being afraid of powerful men. What are you going to take from me? My job? I've survived worse. My dignity? I buried my child. There's no humiliation deeper than that. My life." She met his eyes. "Some days, I'm not even sure I want to keep it." The raw honesty of it stole his breath. "But then I remember Lily," she said softly. "And how much she loved Christmas. How she believed that goodness existed, that miracles happened, that people could change. And I think, if I give up on joy, if I let the grief win, then what was the point of her life? What did she teach me if not to keep hoping?" Nicholas stared at his plate, his throat tight. "So no, Mr. Vieri. I'm not afraid of you. Because I've already survived the worst thing that could happen to me. And nothing you do can hurt me more than that." They ate in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who understood that some things didn't need words. When they finished, she started cleaning up. He stood to help. "You don't have to." "I know," he said, picking up the dishes. "But I'm going to anyway." They worked side by side, washing and drying, moving around each other in the small space with surprising ease. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, something shifted. "Tell me about her," he said suddenly. "About Lily." Margaret paused, her hands in the soapy water, and for a moment he thought she'd refuse. Then she smiled, a real smile, soft and sad and beautiful. "She was stubborn," Margaret said. Lord, that girl was stubborn. Once she decided she wanted something, there was no talking her out of it. "She got that from me." She laughed quietly. She loved books. Fantasy mostly. Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, anything with magic. She'd read under her covers with a flashlight past bedtime, and I'd pretend not to notice. What else? She had this laugh, high and bright like bells. And she'd laugh at everything. Bad jokes, silly faces, her own clumsiness. She found joy in the smallest things. A butterfly landing on her hand. Fresh snow. The first strawberry of summer. Margaret's voice cracked. She made the world feel magic just by being in it. Nicholas dried the last dish, set it down carefully. "She sounds remarkable." She was. Margaret wiped her eyes. "And I failed her." "What?" "I couldn't save her." What kind of mother can't save her own child? The pain in her voice was so raw, so familiar, that Nicholas spoke before he could stop himself. I couldn't save my mother either. I was 12 when she died. I knew my father was hurting her, knew she was scared, but I was too weak to protect her. Too small. Too powerless. Margaret turned to face him fully. You were a child. So, I should have done something. Called someone. Fought harder. Against a grown man who'd already taught you that fighting back meant pain? She shook her head. That wasn't your failure, Mr. Vieri. That was his. And Lily's death wasn't yours, he said quietly. Cancer doesn't care how good a mother you are. It takes without asking permission. They stood there in the candlelit kitchen, two people carrying guilt that wasn't theirs to carry, finally seeing their pain reflected in someone else's eyes. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Margaret said softly. Broken beyond repair? Or maybe just broken in ways that fit together. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and danger. Nicholas cleared his throat. I should go. Let you rest. Wait. She reached out, not quite touching him, her hand hovering near his arm. Would you sit with me? By the tree? Just for a few minutes. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse. To retreat to his study, his fortress, his carefully constructed isolation. Instead, he nodded. They walked to the parlor together, the tree glowing like a beacon in the storm-dark house. They sat on the floor, their backs against the couch, shoulders not quite touching but close enough to feel each other's warmth. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, Christmas lights twinkled softly. And for the first time in 30 years, Nicholas Vieri didn't feel completely alone. Thank you, Margaret whispered. For listening. For sharing. For not making me feel crazy for caring about a tree. Thank you, he replied, his voice rough, for not letting me forget I'm human. They sat in the glow of the tree until the candles burned low and the storm began to quiet. Two broken people learning that sometimes, survival looks like sitting in the dark with someone who understands. Have you ever found an unexpected connection with someone in the middle of your darkest season? Sometimes healing comes from the people we least expect. Nicholas woke up on the couch. Sunlight streamed through the windows, bright and cold, turning the snow outside into a blanket of diamonds. He blinked, disoriented, his neck stiff from the awkward angle. The tree still glowed beside him, though the lights looked dim in the morning sun. And Margaret was gone. He sat up, running a hand through his hair, trying to piece together the night. They'd talked for hours, about loss, about guilt, about the weight of surviving when the people you loved couldn't. Somewhere around 2 a.m., exhaustion had pulled him under. She must have covered him with the blanket now draped across his lap. The thought unsettled him. When was the last time someone had cared for him like that? Without being paid? Without expecting something in return? He found her in the kitchen, already dressed in her uniform, making coffee. The roads are clear, she said without turning around. Plows came through an hour ago. Your security team called. They'll be here within the hour. Good. He didn't know why the word felt like a lie. She poured him coffee, slid the cup across the counter. Their fingers brushed. She pulled back quickly. Last night, he started. Was last night, she finished gently. We were trapped. We were tired. We said things we maybe shouldn't have. I didn't say anything I didn't mean. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something vulnerable flickered in her eyes. Neither did I. But morning has a way of making nighttime confessions feel dangerous. Is that what we are now? Dangerous to each other? I don't know what we are, Mr. Vieri. She wrapped her hands around her own coffee mug like it could anchor her. But I know what we can't be. I'm your employee. You're my employer. There are lines. Lines you already crossed when you decorated that tree. That's different. How? She opened her mouth, closed it, shook her head. I should finish cleaning the guest rooms. She left before he could argue, but the ghost of her presence lingered in the kitchen. The smell of her coffee, the warmth where she'd stood, the truth she'd refused to speak. We're both terrified of what's growing between us. That afternoon, Nicholas did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He opened the locked drawer in his study. Inside, wrapped in silk cloth, was a small wooden box. His hands trembled as he lifted it, carrying it to his desk like something sacred and cursed all at once. He hadn't looked at these in 3 decades. Hadn't allowed himself to remember. But Margaret's words from the night before echoed in his mind. Grief doesn't give us permission to stop honoring the people we've lost. He opened the box. Photographs spilled out. His mother, young and beautiful, smiling at the camera with Nicholas, maybe 5 years old, on her lap. Another of her in the garden, hands dirty from planting flowers, joy on her face. One of the 2 of them at Christmas, the year before his father destroyed everything. There was a small silver bracelet, delicate and tarnished. His mother's. She'd worn it every day until she died. And at the bottom, folded small and fragile, a paper star. One of the stars he'd cut for his tree all those years ago. His mother must have saved it, hidden it from his father's rage. Nicholas picked it up with shaking hands, unfolding it carefully. The paper was yellowed with age, but his 7-year-old handwriting was still visible. For Mama. Love. Sandro. His throat closed. He'd forgotten that name. Sandro. That's what his mother had called him. That's who he'd been before his father beat the softness out of him and turned him into Nicholas. Cold, hard, untouchable. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said, his voice rough. Margaret entered, carrying fresh linens. She froze when she saw the photographs spread across his desk. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude." "Stay." The word came out more desperate than he intended. "Please." She set down the linens slowly, approached the desk. Her eyes moved over the photographs, and her expression softened. "Your mother." Yes. She was beautiful. She was everything. Nicholas picked up the photograph of them at Christmas. This was the last good year, before everything turned dark. Margaret leaned closer, studying the image. "You look happy. Both of you." "We were." "For a moment." He set it down carefully. "She tried so hard to give me normal. To protect me from what my father was. But in the end it killed her." What happened? He'd never told anyone. Not in 30 years. But something about Margaret, her honesty, her pain, the way she'd shared her own grief so openly, made the words spill out. "My father hit her. Regularly." She hid it well. Makeup, long sleeves, excuses. "But I knew. I always knew." His hands clenched into fists. The night she died they'd fought. About me. She wanted to send me away to boarding school. Somewhere safe. He refused. Said I needed to learn the family business, learn to be a man. Nicholas's voice dropped to barely a whisper. She took his car keys. Said she was leaving, taking me with her. He laughed. Told her she'd never make it. "The accident," Margaret breathed, "wasn't an accident." Nicholas looked up at her, his eyes dark with old rage. The brakes had been cut. Police called it mechanical failure. But I knew. I've always known. Margaret covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh God. He murdered her for trying to save me." The words tasted like ash. "And I've spent 30 years becoming exactly what she died trying to prevent. A man like my father. Cold. Violent. Incapable of gentleness." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" I run the same empire he built. I use fear the same way he did. I've hurt people, Margaret. Destroyed lives. Made widows and orphans. How am I any different? She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of his desk. You kept the photographs, she finally said. You saved that paper star. You let me keep the tree even though it terrified you. You sat with me last night and listened to me grieve. You're asking yourself these questions, something your father never would have done. That doesn't erase what I've become. No, she agreed. But it means you haven't completely lost who you were. That little boy who made stars for his mother. He's still in there, Mr. Vieri. Buried but not dead. Nicholas looked at the paper star in his hands, this fragile piece of his lost childhood. I don't know how to be him again. I don't even know if it's possible. Maybe you don't have to be him again. Margaret moved closer, her voice gentle but firm. Maybe you just have to honor him. Honor what he wanted. What your mother wanted for you. What did she want? For you to be happy. To be safe. To know that gentleness isn't weakness. The words broke something open in his chest, something that had been locked tight for 3 decades. I have something to show you, Margaret said quietly. She left the room, returned moments later with a small notebook. Lily kept a journal. She wrote in it every day, even when she was too sick to sit up. I couldn't read it for 2 years after she died. But when I finally did. She opened to a page near the end, her hands trembling. This is from 2 days before she died. Nicholas took the notebook, read Lily's childish handwriting. Mama cries when she thinks I'm sleeping. She tries to be brave, but I know she's scared. I'm scared too. But I'm not scared of dying. I'm scared Mama will forget how to be happy. I'm scared she'll think loving me was a mistake because losing me hurts too much. So I want to tell her, loving someone is never a mistake. Even if they die. Even if it hurts. The love is the point. The love is what stays. Mama, if you're reading this after I'm gone, please don't stop loving. Don't stop hoping. Don't let losing me make you afraid to live. Promise me. Promise me. Nicholas's vision blurred. He blinked hard, but tears fell anyway, the first he'd cried since his mother's funeral. She was 8 years old, Margaret whispered, and she understood something it's taken me 2 years to learn. That grief is just love with nowhere to go. And the answer isn't to stop loving. It's to find new places to put it. She took the notebook back, closed it gently. Your mother died trying to give you a life worth living, she continued. Lily died asking me not to waste mine. Maybe the way we honor them isn't by being perfect. Maybe it's just by being brave enough to keep trying. To let the tree stand. To feel things again, even when it terrifies us. That afternoon, Nicholas did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He opened the locked drawer in his study. Inside, wrapped in silk cloth, was a small wooden box. His hands trembled as he lifted it, carrying it to his desk like something sacred and cursed all at once. He hadn't looked at these in 3 decades. Hadn't allowed himself to remember. But Margaret's words from the night before echoed in his mind. Grief doesn't give us permission to stop honoring the people we've lost. He opened the box. Photographs spilled out. His mother, young and beautiful, smiling at the camera with Nicholas, maybe 5 years old, on her lap. Another of her in the garden, hands dirty from planting flowers, joy on her face. One of the 2 of them at Christmas, the year before his father destroyed everything. There was a small silver bracelet, delicate and tarnished. His mother's. She'd worn it every day until she died. And at the bottom, folded small and fragile, a paper star. One of the stars he'd cut for his tree all those years ago. His mother must have saved it, hidden it from his father's rage. Nicholas picked it up with shaking hands, unfolding it carefully. The paper was yellowed with age, but his 7-year-old handwriting was still visible. For Mama. Love. Sandro. His throat closed. He'd forgotten that name. Sandro. That's what his mother had called him. That's who he'd been before his father beat the softness out of him and turned him into Nicholas. Cold, hard, untouchable. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said, his voice rough. Margaret entered, carrying fresh linens. She froze when she saw the photographs spread across his desk. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude." "Stay." The word came out more desperate than he intended. "Please." She set down the linens slowly, approached the desk. Her eyes moved over the photographs, and her expression softened. "Your mother." Yes. She was beautiful. She was everything. Nicholas picked up the photograph of them at Christmas. This was the last good year, before everything turned dark. Margaret leaned closer, studying the image. "You look happy. Both of you." "We were." "For a moment." He set it down carefully. "She tried so hard to give me normal, to protect me from what my father was. But in the end it killed her." What happened? He'd never told anyone. Not in 30 years. But something about Margaret, her honesty, her pain, the way she'd shared her own grief so openly, made the words spill out. "My father hit her. Regularly." She hid it well. Makeup, long sleeves, excuses. "But I knew. I always knew." His hands clenched into fists. "The night she died they'd fought. About me. She wanted to send me away to boarding school. Somewhere safe. He refused. Said I needed to learn the family business, learn to be a man." Nicholas's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "She took his car keys. Said she was leaving, taking me with her." He laughed. "Told her she'd never make it." "The accident," Margaret breathed. "Wasn't an accident." Nicholas looked up at her, his eyes dark with old rage. The brakes had been cut. Police called it mechanical failure. "But I knew. I've always known." Margaret covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh God. He murdered her for trying to save me." The words tasted like ash. "And I've spent 30 years becoming exactly what she died trying to prevent. A man like my father. Cold. Violent. Incapable of gentleness." "That's not true." "Isn't it? I run the same empire he built. I use fear the same way he did. I've hurt people, Margaret. Destroyed lives. Made widows and orphans. How am I any different?" She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of his desk. "You kept the photographs," she finally said. "You saved that paper star. You let me keep the tree even though it terrified you. You sat with me last night and listened to me grieve. You're asking yourself these questions, something your father never would have done. That doesn't erase what I've become." "No," she agreed. "But it means you haven't completely lost who you were. That little boy who made stars for his mother. He's still in there, Mr. Vieri. Buried but not dead." Nicholas looked at the paper star in his hands, this fragile piece of his lost childhood. "I don't know how to be him again. I don't even know if it's possible." "Maybe you don't have to be him again." Margaret moved closer, her voice gentle but firm. "Maybe you just have to honor him. Honor what he wanted. What your mother wanted for you. What did she want? For you to be happy. To be safe. To know that gentleness isn't weakness." The words broke something open in his chest, something that had been locked tight for 3 decades. "I have something to show you," Margaret said quietly. She left the room, returned moments later with a small notebook. Lily kept a journal. She wrote in it every day, even when she was too sick to sit up. I couldn't read it for 2 years after she died. But when I finally did. She opened to a page near the end, her hands trembling. This is from 2 days before she died. Nicholas took the notebook, read Lily's childish handwriting. Mama cries when she thinks I'm sleeping. She tries to be brave, but I know she's scared. I'm scared too. But I'm not scared of dying. I'm scared Mama will forget how to be happy. I'm scared she'll think loving me was a mistake because losing me hurts too much. So I want to tell her, loving someone is never a mistake. Even if they die. Even if it hurts. The love is the point. The love is what stays. Mama, if you're reading this after I'm gone, please don't stop loving. Don't stop hoping. Don't let losing me make you afraid to live. Promise me. Promise me. Nicholas's vision blurred. He blinked hard, but tears fell anyway, the first he'd cried since his mother's funeral. She was 8 years old, Margaret whispered, and she understood something it's taken me 2 years to learn. That grief is just love with nowhere to go. And the answer isn't to stop loving. It's to find new places to put it. She took the notebook back, closed it gently. Your mother died trying to give you a life worth living, she continued. Lily died asking me not to waste mine. Maybe the way we honor them isn't by being perfect. Maybe it's just by being brave enough to keep trying. To let the tree stand. To feel things again, even when it terrifies us. Nicholas set down the paper star, looked up at her through tears he couldn't stop. I don't know how. Neither do I. She smiled, sad and soft. But maybe we figure it out together. She reached out, squeezed his hand once. Brief, warm, real. Then left him alone with his mother's photographs and a child's paper star and the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, he was allowed to be human again. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The world gleamed white and new, waiting for spring, waiting for warmth, waiting for men like Nicholas Vieri to realize that surviving wasn't the same as living. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to learn the difference. When was the last time you let yourself be seen? Fully, truthfully, scars and all? Sometimes healing begins the moment we stop hiding. Something changed after that day. Nicholas didn't retreat back into his fortress. Instead, he found himself drawn to wherever Margaret was. The kitchen where she hummed while cooking, the parlor where she dusted around the tree with reverent care, the library where she'd sneak moments to read during her breaks. 3 days after their conversation in his study, he found her struggling with a box of ornaments she'd brought from home. Let me help, he said, taking the box before she could protest. She looked at him, surprised. You don't have to. I know. I want to. They spent the afternoon adding Lily's ornaments to the tree. Each one had a story: a felt reindeer made in kindergarten, a popsicle stick snowflake, a glass ball with Lily's handprint painted on it. She made this one the Christmas before she got sick, Margaret said, holding up a clay angel with lopsided wings. She was so proud of it. Said it looked just like the angels in her books. Nicholas took it carefully, examining the child's careful work. It's perfect. It's crooked and messy. That's what makes it perfect. He hung it on a prominent branch, adjusting it until the light caught it just right. The perfect things are boring. It's the imperfect things that matter. Margaret's eyes glistened. When did you become wise? About 3 days ago. I'm still learning. She laughed, really laughed, and the sound filled the cold house with warmth. They worked in comfortable silence, passing ornaments back and forth, their hands brushing, their shoulders touching. At some point, Margaret started humming Silent Night, and Nicholas found himself joining in, his rusty voice stumbling over words he hadn't sung since childhood. You have a terrible voice, she teased. I'm aware. My mother used to say I sounded like a wounded cat. She wasn't wrong. But she was smiling, and so was he, and for the first time in 30 years, Nicholas felt something dangerously close to happiness. When they finished, they stood back to admire their work. The tree was no longer the elegant, impersonal decoration it had been. Now it was cluttered with mismatched ornaments, each one carrying a story, a memory, a piece of love. It's beautiful, Margaret whispered. It is, Nicholas agreed. But he wasn't looking at the tree. He was looking at her, the way the lights caught in her dark eyes, the soft smile on her lips, the peace on her face. She turned, caught him staring. Neither of them looked away. Mr. Vieri. Nicholas, he interrupted. My name is Nicholas. Or Sandro if you prefer. That's what my mother called me. Sandro, she repeated softly, testing the name. It suits you better. Does it? The other name, Nicholas, it's armor. But Sandro, that's the person underneath. He stepped closer, drawn by something he couldn't name and couldn't resist. And which one are you talking to right now? Both, she said. I think I've been talking to both all along. His hand lifted, almost of its own accord, tucking a curl behind her ear. She inhaled sharply but didn't pull away. Margaret. The doorbell rang, shattering the moment like glass. They stepped apart quickly, the spell broken. Nicholas's jaw clenched as he recognized the aggressive ring pattern. His lieutenant. Carlo. Stay here, he told Margaret, his voice dropping back into the cold authority of Nicholas Vieri, Mafia boss. But as he walked to the door, he could still feel the ghost of her skin under his fingertips, could still see the way she'd looked at him, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous. Hope. Carlo stood on the doorstep with two other men, their faces hard, their postures aggressive. We need to talk, Carlo said, pushing past Nicholas into the house. I don't remember inviting you in. Since when do I need an invitation? Carlo's eyes swept the foyer, landing on the garland Margaret had draped over the banister that morning. His lip curled. What the hell is this? Decorations. Decorations. Carlo laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're putting up Christmas decorations now? What's next, boss? Caroling? Baking cookies? Maybe we should all hold hands and sing Jingle Bells. Get to the point, Carlo. The point is that people are talking. Saying you've gone soft. Saying you're distracted. Carlo stepped closer, his voice dropping. Saying some woman has you by the balls. Nicholas's hands clenched into fists. Watch your mouth. Why? It's true, isn't it? Carlo jerked his chin toward the parlor where the tree glowed. A month ago, you'd have fired anyone who brought that thing into your house. Now you're decorating it? Come on, boss. We all know what's happening here. You don't know anything. I know weakness when I see it. Carlo's eyes were cold. And I know what your father would have done to anyone who made him look weak. The words hit like a physical blow. Before Nicholas could respond, Margaret appeared in the parlor doorway, her expression wary. Is everything all right? Carlo's gaze shifted to her, assessing and dismissive. So this is her. The maid who's got our boss playing house. Carlo. Nicholas's voice was a warning. But Carlo ignored him, addressing Margaret directly. Do you have any idea who this man is? What he's done? How many people have died on his orders? I know exactly who he is, Margaret said quietly, her voice steady despite the fear Nicholas could see in her eyes. Do you? Because the man I know doesn't decorate Christmas trees and make friends with the help. The man I know understands that sentiment is a liability. That caring about people makes you weak. Then maybe, Margaret said, lifting her chin, you don't know him as well as you think you do. The room went silent. Dangerous. Carlo turned back to Nicholas, his expression hardening. Choose. Right now. The business that's kept you alive and powerful for 15 years, or this, whatever this is. Because you can't have both. Nicholas felt the weight of 30 years pressing down on him. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Weakness will get you killed. Love is a luxury men like us can't afford. He looked at Margaret, standing there in her simple uniform, her eyes pleading with him to be brave, to be the man he'd started becoming these past few days. And he made the worst decision of his life. She's just the housekeeper, Carlo. Nothing more. He watched Margaret flinch as if he'd struck her. The decorations were her idea, he continued, his voice cold, each word a betrayal. A sentimental gesture I tolerated. But you're right. It ends now. He turned to Margaret, and the look in her eyes nearly broke him. Remove the tree. All of it. Tonight. Sandro. Her voice cracked on his name. It's Mr. Vieri, he said, and hated himself for it. And you'll do as I say, or you can find employment elsewhere. Carlo smiled. Victorious. That's more like it. Margaret stood there for one more moment, her eyes searching his face for any sign of the man who'd cried over his mother's photographs, who'd hung her daughter's ornaments with gentle hands, who'd almost kissed her an hour ago. But Nicholas had locked that man away again, buried him under layers of ice and fear. I understand, Margaret said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll pack my things. Margaret. But she was already walking away, her spine straight, her dignity intact, leaving Nicholas standing in his cold, perfect house with men who respected his power but would never know his heart. Carlo clapped him on the shoulder. Good choice, boss. Almost had me worried there. Nicholas watched Margaret disappear up the stairs, and felt something inside him shatter beyond repair. He'd survived his father's fists, his mother's death, 30 years of violence and fear. But he wasn't sure he'd survive this. For 3 days, the house was silent. Margaret had left without another word, taking her ornaments, her hope, her light. The tree stood in the parlor like a corpse, still decorated but lifeless, a monument to Nicholas's cowardice. He'd told himself he'd done the right thing. Protected her. Kept her safe from his world. But late at night, when the whiskey didn't work and sleep wouldn't come, he knew the truth. He hadn't protected her. He'd destroyed her. Just like his father had destroyed everything beautiful that dared to exist in his presence. On the 4th day, Christmas Eve, Nicholas stood in front of the tree and finally admitted what he'd been running from his entire life. He was terrified of love. Terrified that anything he cared about would be taken away. Terrified that he'd poison whatever he touched. His father had taught him that lesson well. But Margaret had taught him something else. That fear wasn't strength. It was just another prison. He picked up the construction paper angel, Lily's angel, that Margaret had left behind in her haste to escape. The glitter sparkled in the light, and he remembered what she'd read from Lily's journal. Loving someone is never a mistake. Even if they die. Even if it hurts. The love is the point. The love is what stays. An 8-year-old girl understood what he'd spent 30 years denying. Nicholas pulled out his phone, called his head of security. Find Margaret Bennett. Now. 2 hours later, he had an address. A children's shelter on the east side where she volunteered. He drove through snow-dusted streets, his heart pounding, rehearsing and discarding a dozen speeches. What could he possibly say? How could he possibly apologize for choosing fear over courage, power over love, safety over truth? The shelter was modest, warm light spilling from its windows. Inside, he found her. She was reading to a group of children, her voice soft and animated, bringing a story to life. The kids sat transfixed, their faces glowing with wonder. She wore jeans and a red sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked more beautiful than anything he'd ever seen. Then she looked up and saw him. The story faltered. The children protested. But Margaret set down the book, murmured something to another volunteer, and walked to where Nicholas stood in the doorway. They faced each other across an impossible distance of 4 days and 30 years of accumulated fear. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was carefully neutral, but he could see the hurt in her eyes. "I came to apologize." "Apology noted. You can go now." "Margaret. It's Miss Bennet." She crossed her arms. "You made yourself very clear, Mr. Vieri. I was just the help. A sentimental fool who overstepped. I get it. Message received. I lied." "Excuse me. I lied." His voice cracked. "You weren't just the help. You are." He struggled for words. "You're the first person in 30 years who saw me. Really saw me. Not my power or my money or my reputation. Just me. Sandro. The broken boy underneath all the armor." Her eyes glistened, but her expression remained guarded. "And yet you threw me away the moment someone challenged you." "Because I was terrified." The admission cost him everything. Carlo was right about one thing. Caring about you makes me weak. But not because love is weakness. Because it gives me something to lose. And I've spent my entire life making sure I never had anything anyone could take from me. So you pushed me away first. Yes. He stepped closer. And it was the biggest mistake of my life. Why should I believe you? Her voice shook. How do I know you won't do it again the next time someone questions you? The next time being with me costs you something? You don't, he said honestly. I can't promise I won't be afraid. I can't promise I won't mess this up. But I can promise I'll try. Every day, I'll try to be brave enough to deserve you. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't want you to deserve me, Sandro. I want you to choose me. Even when it's hard. Even when it's dangerous. Even when it costs you everything. Then I choose you. He pulled out the paper angel, held it between them. Your daughter understood something I'm only now learning. That love isn't about being safe. It's about being brave. And I want to be brave, Margaret. With you. For you. She stared at the angel, fresh tears streaming down her face. I don't know how this works, he continued. I don't know how to be what you need. I've hurt people. Done terrible things. I'm not. I'll never be. I'm not asking you to be perfect. She reached out, took the angel from his hands. I'm asking you to be honest. To choose healing over hiding. To believe that two broken people can build something beautiful together. Can they? I don't know. She looked up at him, her eyes full of tears and hope and terrifying possibility. But I'd like to find out. If you're willing to risk it. I'm willing to risk everything, he said. For you. For us. For the chance to learn what my mother wanted for me. What Lily wanted for you. To live. Not just survive, but actually live. She studied his face for a long moment, searching for lies, for weakness, for reasons to protect her heart. Then she stepped into his arms. They drove back to the estate together, the silence between them comfortable now, full of possibility instead of fear. The tree still stood in the parlor, waiting. I thought you'd have taken it down, Margaret said, running her hand along a branch. I couldn't. Nicholas stood beside her. It was the last piece of you in this house. I couldn't make myself destroy it. She picked up Lily's angel, hung it carefully on a center branch where the light would catch it. This belongs here. So do you. He turned to face her. I'm stepping back from the business. Not completely. I can't just walk away from everything overnight. But I'm done with the violence. Done building an empire on fear. I want to build something else. Something that would make my mother proud. What will you do? I don't know yet. But I have resources. Money. Power. Maybe it's time I used them for something other than destruction. He touched her face gently. Will you help me figure it out? Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. A life. A chance to heal together. He paused. I'm offering you my heart, Margaret. Broken and scarred as it is. If you'll have it. She smiled through tears. I think my broken heart might fit pretty well with yours. He kissed her then. Softly, carefully, like she was something precious. And maybe she was. Maybe they both were. Two people who'd survived impossible losses, learning that survival was just the beginning. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. I'm still scared. So am I. Good. She laughed softly. That means we're doing it right. They stood together beneath the Christmas tree, its lights glowing warm and steady, and made silent promises to keep trying, keep hoping, keep choosing love even when it terrified them. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle, covering the world in white. Inside, two broken people held each other and dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, they deserved to be happy. That Christmas trees didn't belong only to people who'd earned them. That joy wasn't reserved for the innocent. That love was for everyone brave enough to reach for it. And that sometimes, the greatest gift isn't perfection. It's the courage to try again. Nicholas looked at the tree, at Lily's crooked angel, at his mother's paper star hanging beside it, at the mismatched ornaments that told stories of loss and hope and everything in between. Thank you, he whispered to the ghosts of the people who'd loved them. For not giving up on us. For teaching us that it's never too late to come home. Margaret squeezed his hand. Merry Christmas, Sandro. Merry Christmas, Margaret. And for the first time in 30 years, Nicholas Vieri meant it. Love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone brave enough to be broken with you. Who in your life has taught you that love is worth the risk? Share your story below. Someone needs to hear it today. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.